Hi everyone, it's Miss Simpson here. I hope you're well. In today's activity, we are going to look at a growing plants experiment. Scientists who study all different kinds of science, we know this from school, use experiments to do their studying. Before they start an experiment, though, they ask questions. They're thinking about what to explore in the world. So, for example, they might ask something like, what will happen to a bean plant if there is more salt in the soil? So once they have their question, they can come up with a hypothesis. A hypothesis is an explanation for what might be happening. Scientists aren't sure, but they think that this is what's going to happen. For example, the scientist might think that too much salt in the soil will kill the bean plant. So now the scientist does the experiment to test that hypothesis. When scientists do their experiments, they're thinking about three things. What's going to be the independent variable? So this is what the scientist changes throughout the experiment. What's going to be the control variable? So this is what the scientist keeps the same throughout the experiment that they'll use to compare their dependent variable. The dependent variable is what will change as the scientist changes the independent variable. So the dependent variable depends on the independent variable. Let's take a look, if we were to do this bean experiment, at what our control, independent, and dependent variables would be. Our control variable, or we could call it our control group, would be a bean plant. We're going to use the same bean seeds in our control group and our dependent variable. And it would be growing in regular soil. Nothing's been added or changed about the soil. Our independent variable would be the salt. This is what the scientist is changing. He or she is going to add salt to the soil of another bean plant. They'll add salt to the soil of this dependent variable. So this bean plant is going to change because salt's being added. And the scientist is going to study how does the salt affect this dependent variable. So for your experiment, what we're going to do is study how different independent variables affect plants. So we're going to log into Gizmos. You can wait until I'm done with the video. And then you're going to launch the Growing Plants experiment. It looks like this down here. Once you launch it, you should see a page that looks like this. I'm going to go to that page now and walk you through what you can do. Before we take a look at the Gizmos experiment, let's take a look at your worksheet. So you have a worksheet attached to this assignment in the Google Classroom. It should prompt you to make a copy. Then you're able to write directly on your copy. You're going to be experimenting with different independent variables. Your independent variables can be the amount of light you use, how much water you use, and using fertilizer or compost in your plants. You're going to run your experiment 2 times. So first you'll pick what seed you want to use. You should use the same seed in every pot because that's your control group. Then you'll change your independent variables for pot A, B, and C. So make sure you write down here what your independent variable for each pot was. Then run your experiment and write down which plant grew the most. I'm on Gizmos now. So let's take a look at what you do. You can pick your plant. You have a tomato, you have a bean, or you have a turnip. So for experiment 1, pick which one you want to use. I'm going to use a bean. So you can click on and drag your beans into all 3 pots. Then you have some independent variables. You can change your water for each pot. You could turn the lights on and off. You can add fertilizer to a pot, and you can add compost to a pot. Now here's the thing. Make sure that you're only changing one thing about each pot, because we want to test one independent variable per pot. So for example here, I've set my lights to all be the same. I want to make sure my water is the same in each, because I want to test the fertilizer and the compost. So I'm going to put the fertilizer in one pot, compost in the other. And then in this pot, I'll just leave water. So then I can hit this play button here, and it will grow my plant over several days. Okay, so I watched my plants grow, and I can see here some different things. So my height for using fertilizer was 51 centimeters, and my mass, so it's kind of how much matter the plant is taking up, is 8.5. Yeah, my bean plant got a little higher with the compost at 51.9 centimeters, but its mass was slightly smaller. And then we can see that the bean plant that just had the soil, we can kind of consider this one our control group, didn't grow as high, and its mass was less. So you would go ahead and write down these things in your worksheet. So for the fertilizer, your bean plant grew 51 centimeters and weighed, well, its mass was 8.5 grams. So then you can go ahead and run the experiment again. Remember, you want to try to only change one independent variable each time you run the experiment so that you're able to compare them. So for one experiment, you might turn off the lights and leave everything else the same. For the other ones, maybe this one you're going to turn off one light, and then you have the one that has all the lights on. And you can run the experiment, see which plant will grow. So we can see here my one with no lights. Looks like it's dead. My one with 2 lights, it grew tall, but its mass was 4.8 grams. Whereas the one that I had all the lights on, it didn't grow as tall, but its mass is greater at 6.9 grams. So remember, your independent variables that you'll change throughout here are your water, your lights, your fertilizer, and your compost. If you have any questions, let me know.